Hello, hello, and welcome to Saturday Soundbites. I'm your host, Veronica Sofer, and I'm thrilled to be here with you today because on Saturday Soundbites, we talk about some of my favorite things, which include marketing, advertising, networking, branding, and all the things that make up a great visibility strategy. When you are thinking about your business and your brand and all the things that you have to put together to make sure that your message is coming across, it always starts with a story. And so today's guest is fantastic. You're absolutely going to love her. And we're going to talk about storytelling and how it can help you grow your business. But before we get started, let's take care of a little bit of housekeeping. If you're listening on the podcast, make sure you hit subscribe. We don't want you to miss any episodes of Saturday Soundbites. If you are watching on Facebook or YouTube, drop us some comments and my guest and I will connect with you. And if you catch the replay, just put hashtag replay so that we can go back and say hello and answer any questions you might have. So with that, we're going to go ahead and get started. I have a great guest. Welcome to the show, Mags Thomson. Welcome, welcome.
Hi, it's so good to be here. Thank you.
Thank you for joining us. Now tell us where you're joining us from, because I always think that that's fun to start out with.
I am in The Hague in the Netherlands.
Very good. Very good.
Fairly long way away.
Very long way. Yes, I would say so. And so, Mags, you are an expert in storytelling. You have a phenomenal background. And I want to just help the audience better understand how you really got connected to storytelling. So tell us a little bit about how this process started and how you got into the space that you're at.
Well, I've always been a storyteller, actually. There's a little note that I have in my house that I wrote when I was about 3 that says Oma, which is Dutch for grandma. And that's my first writing, so to speak. But in a more professional context, I started my entrepreneurial journey in 2013 when I co-founded a platform for people recovering from emotional abuse. And that came to be me and my co-founders were all people who had survived growing up in emotionally abusive households, families. And so the whole platform, everything that we were sharing was really our story, our experiences, both growing up, but also our experiences coming out of that and healing those emotional wounds.
Mm-hmm.
And so from that moment on, storytelling and sort of tapping into my own experiences became something more public.
Mm-hmm.
and sometimes I feel like when we're telling our stories, and this is really where what I try to help people with, because when we're telling our story, and it's very emotional because it's our experiences, right? And it feels very vulnerable to share that. Whereas our marketing at least to some degree, has to have some sort of strategic
Right.
foundation, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that there's a sort of a discrepancy between that emotive storytelling and that strategic sharing on your social media.
Mm-hmm.
And there are ways to bridge that gap without sort of, damaging your own mental health, because, sharing too much or too soon can definitely have a negative effect on our own well-being. And that's obviously not what we want when we do this. And yeah, I started getting the questions so many times, like, how do you do it? How do you, how brave of you to share all this? And there's maybe a little bit of bravery in there, but I think mostly it's just about being a bit clever about it, maybe.
Right. No, I
And
think that's so true. And I love that you talk about vulnerability, because as entrepreneurs, everyone has a story. There's a reason why that they've started their business, whether it's a service business or a product business. And so I think that's absolutely true. Tell me a little bit about the idea of taking on this project with others in a collaborative approach. I think the other founders, they had their why behind putting the project together. And I'm just fascinated that you came together and were able to put together a project that was so meaningful, that was really focused on telling everyone's story.
it really was. And I think for me, and I think actually for all of us, it was this sense of letting people know that they're not alone, because when we I mean, anyone who's experienced abuse in any type of form will know that one of the first things that an abuser tries to do is to make you feel like you're the crazy one and you're all alone in this and no one will believe you or help you. And so creating a creating a platform and a community where people could say, we always said it feels so good when you don't have to start a story with, this is going to sound crazy, but
Yeah.
right, because people can relate to the experience, even though the players are different and maybe, but there's so much that is really similar. Like the manipulations of that kind of behavior are very similar
Mm-hmm.
across the board. And just having people tell those stories, just we had experienced that by being in that grouping together. There was
Mm-hmm.
about 10 of us, not all of us, not all of the 10 ladies who initially dreamed it up ended up being part of the platform, um but just having that feeling of recognition that, oh, you had that too, so I'm not going crazy, was really our sort of what bonded us together. And that's
Mm-hmm.
really why we wanted to share it with people. And this was also, I think about it now, but this was before Facebook groups, and there's so many Facebook groups that sort of have a similar angle, I
Mm-hmm.
suppose.
Mm-hmm.
But this was all before any of that, where
Yeah.
it was just harder to connect to people with sort of those similar experiences.
Yeah, no, that's so true. So then you transition to use that experience and you're transitioning to another way of expressing that. Tell us a little bit about your projects and currently you're helping people with self-publishing, but more importantly, the medium you have found to help people share their stories because that's so important. We all have a story to tell. When we get the courage to put it together and actually tell it, it's then the question is where do we tell the story at and to whom?
Absolutely. And I think so. Just before I was we just in our little pre-conversation, I was telling you, just before the pandemic hit, we lost funding on the platform. So we had to close it down, and I had to sort of reinvent myself while I guess the whole world had to just figure out
Mhm.
what we were going to do with ourselves. But that storytelling always stayed with me, and that idea that we're in this. I think most of us will have this story or this. There's a reason that we started, not just started a business, but that we started this business.
Yeah.
Right? There's an experience, and whether that's because I always struggled with this task in my life, and now I've thought of a clever product that can help you with it, or I have had this experience and I want to keep you from having to struggle through it, so I'm going to coach you through it, or whatever, wherever we sort of land on that spectrum. But there's a story behind it, and I think that when we are as consumers, when we are looking to work with people, and especially when we're looking for small businesses,
Mhm.
then we're looking for that human connection. If I just want fast and easy and cheap, then I'll go to the big corporations
Mhm.
because that's fast and easy and cheap. But if I want something special or something specific where I want to work one on one with someone, then I'm going to look for a person that I feel some sort of connection with. I
Mhm.
often say, like, a lot of the business coaches I've worked with over the years have similar stories to my own, because
Mhm.
I also know that they can recognize when I spin out,
Mhm.
because they understand that spin, right? Because
Mhm.
they've
Mhm.
had a similar experience to me. It's not that experience has nothing to do with my business. It's part of my personality.
Mhm.
And so it helps when someone knows that story about me and when I know that they can recognize it.
Mhm.
Um, and so that's one of the reasons why I think it's so important to share these stories, um, so that people understand where we're coming from and what perspective we might take on our work. And then another really important reason why I think we should share our stories is because the sort of social narrative can be a little bit limiting, a little bit one-sided.
Uh-huh. Yeah, that's true.
Um, and so I think adding more voices and more honest stories about what our life is like, rather than only ever hitting the high notes that
Mhm.
social media would like us to only celebrate all the things that are good, or kind of paint over the rougher patches. But I think it's so important, if we want to understand each other as people with different life experiences, then we need to tell our stories, because otherwise, how am I supposed to know what your life is like, and vice versa? We're
Right.
half a world apart, and
Yeah.
there's overlap in our stories, guaranteed. But there's also experiences that I could never have, because I'm in the Netherlands, and and you're in the States,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So I think this can bring us together in very important ways, and sort of open up this one-sided, um, sort of male-centric, white-centric
Yeah. There's
social
definitely,
narrative.
well, there's value in connecting with people who have similar stories and um who don't live near you, don't live in your country, don't live in the same type of community you live in. And so when you can find them, and like you said before, Facebook and some of the other tools that we have, that was much harder. But when you can make that connection, it really created some phenomenal collaborations. But without that initial connection of a story, it was really hard to find that person. And so I think in a way, we're blessed that the pandemic has opened up a lot of other tools for us to connect with people so far away from where we live and where we work.
Absolutely. And it's really interesting that you say that as well, because one of the women that I started the original platform with, she's from Shreveport. And so, which is closer to your end of the
Yeah,
world.
not far. I can hop in a car and get there.
um, and it was so interesting to us as well when we were sharing stories about our upbringing, that although we grew up half a world away, so there were so many parallels in our experiences. And it just makes you realize that there is all this culture, and there is background, and all these sort of things that make us different. But there's also a lot of stuff that just is just that makes us the same, right?
Mhm,
There's always common ground. And yeah, sometimes you need to dig a little bit deeper. But at the end of the day, we're all just human beings
mhm. Yeah,
with
no.
experiences.
Yeah, no, it's so true. That's so true. So tell me how you focus on working with people to tell their stories and to have the courage to craft a story that they're willing to tell. Because I know not everyone's there. They do focus on their marketing. They talk about what it is they can do for you, and it's the advertising isn't necessarily as authentic as some people would like. And so when they decide that they want to be a little bit more authentic, how do you help them get that story out there?
So there's a couple of things that I bring together, which is that the storytelling, so it's the content marketing, and it's publicity, and it's collaboration. And I think
Mhm.
especially in that aspect of collaboration is very important for this, our sort of fear of vulnerability and visibility. Because what it does, I always say, is because you're first, maybe they're talking to me about their story, and then we start working on putting it together, either um, in terms of an interview, or in terms of them working on their book. Um, but it's still quite safe, right? And then other people start getting into that process as well. The editor might get into the process, or the other people that they're collaborating, co-creating with, will get in on the story. So it's just kind of, it grows that visibility a little bit more gradually
Yeah.
than
Yeah.
if you're just sharing immediately to your big audience.
Mhm.
So I think there's something to be said, and for that. And even if I would say that in any case, if you're wanting to tell your story, like start small and sort of work your way outwards with people who are less and less familiar to you,
Yeah. No,
if
that's
that
great
makes sense.
advice.
Because obviously your friends are going to feel relatively safe, but then working with a book coach or with a publisher, that takes it a little bit further away, and then you can sort of push that out. It's like your comfort zone, except for visibility, I suppose.
Mhm, mhm. No, that makes complete sense. I love starting small. And I think once you start small and it's well received, you have the courage to add a little bit more to it and invest a little bit more energy into that vulnerability part. And not
Yeah.
everyone has to give all that up, but it helps as you're trying to make that connection.
Well, yeah, and you don't have to share your entire life story on day one. That's the first. Actually, you never have to share your entire life story. Like, share what you want to share,
Mhm,
and also realize that different places can invite different ways of sharing. Right. So on your social media, you might want to keep it relatively surface level, but in your newsletter, you can go a little bit deeper because those people have all, you've already have uh, yeah, you have a different sort of social contract with those
mhm,
people,
mhm,
right? So there's more of a familiarity already. So I think as well, like, just think about, how comfortable do I feel sharing with this particular audience? And yeah, the bigger the audience, maybe the less you want to get into all the nitty gritty of it.
mhm,
um, and then and then it's a muscle, so train that muscle, just keep doing it. And it feels really awkward, and sometimes it feels awkward because people are reading it and commenting it, and sometimes it feels awkward because nobody is
right.
commenting on it, and both can be equally scary.
Mhm. No, that's so true. I'm glad you said that because there have been times when I've certainly said, "Uh-oh, was that a mistake? No one's reading it," or, "Oh, wow, too many comments. I shouldn't have said that." So I think that that's normal for anyone who's especially new to using that approach and growing their business. Mags, tell us a little bit about your magazine and how that becomes a platform for people to really connect and grow their network.
Yeah, so the magazine I started last year, it's called FEM, which most days stands for the Feminist Entrepreneurs Magazine. Some days stands for Finally Eradicating Misogyny, depending on how I wake up in the morning. And I really, I kind of use the word feminist as well because it kind of pokes at people and it makes people think, which is something that I'm quite passionate about. Like, let's see, let's, it, whatever it does, it gives people an emotional response.
Mhm.
um, but the magazine is really, like I said, the idea is that people collaborate. So I bring together a group of people every month who contribute in different ways to the magazine, either through doing an interview with me, submitting original articles from themselves. And I've recently also added the option of doing a repurpose. So let's say you've done a training or a live broadcast or a podcast that you feel was very good and packed a lot of value, then you can submit that and we can repurpose it into an article. And the idea is that we bring out the magazine, goes out to our audiences and obviously to the people who've subscribed to it. Um, it's a free subscription. So anyone who hears this, and
Awesome.
new
Yes.
editions coming out on the 1st of August. So yeah, it goes out. It's the layout is like a proper magazine. It goes out like a flip magazine. So it's an
Mhm.
online read, but it's a magazine rather than, another blog that you have to follow online. So I always say to people, open it on your tablet, go sit on the sofa, have a cup of tea, like, sort of enjoy it a little bit
Mhm.
more from the, feel inspired by these other people who are doing amazing things. It's really about, how can we impact the world as solo entrepreneurs? How can we bring change? How can we have impact? How can we run our business in more sustainable ways? How can we sort of get away from this hustle, grind, competitive, like 100% always on competition sort of attitude to business? And the people who've contributed to each edition will then come together and promote and engage with each other's content. And so it opens up everybody's audience to each other. So I always say, like, if we all have 500 people that follow us, I just say 500 because that's easy maths. Um, and we're 10 people, then suddenly, rather than promoting our content to 500 people, we're promoting to 5,000 people. And it's not that you're going to have all of those 5,000 people interact with you, not at all. But there's always people in our audience who kind of connect to either who's personally connected to us, or who kind of like what we're doing, but we're not quite the right fit for them, or it's not
Mhm.
quite the service they're looking for. But maybe someone else in the group just hits it with them, right? And if we all have those gaps in our audience, then it just means that we can start conversations with these people.
Mhm.
And so everybody gets my, this is how you can use all of this content that I'm throwing at you. You get a whole pack with captions and graphics and all that stuff, but also all of the ways that I engage with audiences on my own social media to really sort of make that momentum work for your business and get conversations started
Mhm.
with some new people.
Yeah.
It's all about like I said, it's all about connections. It's all about really having conversations with people, um, whether online or in, or jumping on a call or having a conversation in your DMs. But I think too often we're kind of so focused on making the sales that we forget that relationship building aspect of it.
Absolutely.
And
Yeah.
this is, I think, the beauty of doing a magazine like this is because you can really put some of your story and some of your expertise in a very different format that just lends itself more to having that real connection with people.
No, I agree. And people can read at their leisure in a time when they're comfortable, maybe where they're not in the 9 to 5 of the workday, and then they make a connection, like you said, and then they decide to reach out or not reach out, but it's not pressure. There's not that pressure. Hey, what do you think? Can I call you back? When can I sign you up? I mean, there's none of that high level pitching. So I think it's a really great way to share your services with others, and more importantly, if it's not right for you, be able to recommend it to someone else. So I love
Yeah.
that you mentioned that, because that's a great benefit.
Well, and that's the thing when and I say this as well for people who are doing their book, and when we're talking about the marketing aspects of doing your book, because I always say, like, just putting your book on like Amazon and self-publishing in and of itself is not going to make your business grow. You have to integrate it into your marketing. You have to have a strategy behind how you're going to get readers from your book to have a conversation with you
Hmm.
if you want them to buy from you. So that's really that's another way that people can work with me. But that's really what that's focused on, is bridging that book into your marketing and into having conversations with people. And but when we're reading a magazine or when we're reading a book and we like it, we give it to our friends,
That's right. Yes, that's so true. Yeah.
right? I don't know about you, but social media posts I share are usually cats or dogs doing weird things. They are very rarely business. Oh, this, but all these conversations I have with people, people always come to me and say, like, hey, people come to me as well, like, hey, do you know someone who could speak at my event because someone dropped out? If I've had a conversation with a person, I can say, oh, I know someone
Hmm.
because I've had that conversation with them,
Hmm.
right? And this is, I think, women are so good at making those connections, but I don't think we're always very good at leveraging those connections.
Yeah. Yeah. I would agree with you. I think it's in our wiring, but I think we have to learn to see it through, get the circle all the way through.
Yeah. And I'm not always perfect at it, but that's fine. We're all learning.
We're all learning and growing. Well, Max, you mentioned the self-publishing before. I know we're getting close to time, but before we wrap up, tell us about how you help folks with self-publishing, because I know we have a lot of viewers and listeners who have considered writing a book, or they are working on writing a book. And we've talked a lot on the show about traditional publishing and self-publishing, but I'd love to give people another resource as they're thinking through that for themselves.
Well, like I said, what I really focus on with people on that is to come up with a strategy around the marketing, not just the marketing of their book, but the marketing of their business as well. Like, my number one tip that I'll just give away to everyone, because I think it's so important, when you refer people from your book to your business, do it in a way that you can capture them so you can have a conversation with them. If you just put your URL in it, they're good. They might look at your website, they might not, but they're not going to have a conversation with you.
Mhm.
Whereas if you can, link your book to an opt-in that you've created for your email list, now suddenly you're funneling people into your marketing where you can have that conversation with them. So I think it's really important that we think about how how will my book what will my book do? Will I give it away to people so that they have an idea of who I am or what I do, or is it or is it really meant to create passive income? But if it is, then how am I going to make sure that my sales are keeping up? So it's really about being strategic about what it is that you do and how you leverage it, because I think a lot of us also forget to then maybe get some publicity around a book or a book launch. These are all really good things that we can use to sort of grow our visibility. Of course, a book gives you authority in your field, and it can help your SEO, and it can help all these different ways to sort of strengthen your online brand, but you have to be strategic about it.
Yeah,
So that's really the
absolutely.
part where I help people, not so much with the writing or the editing, although I know lots of people who are really good at helping people there as
Yeah, I
well.
bet you do.
But that's not my particular zone of genius. So it's
Mhm.
really about getting strategic about how to use your book so it doesn't sort of become this forgotten thing that we've this thing
Yeah.
that we've put out into the and listen, I've learned a lot from books that did really, really poorly. But my biggest brag is that the co-authored book that I put out last year hit number one in the Kindle store in the Netherlands, and we outperformed Stephen King. I mean, for a day,
Yeah,
but we
sure, sure,
outperformed
sure,
Stephen King. We
sure.
got to number one in the Kindle store on the day it came out. So there's and that everybody can, and I know that may sound a little bit bleak, but everybody can be a bestseller on Amazon, but you have to be strategic about it.
Yeah, absolutely. No, that's a great tip. I love it. Mags, I'm going to put your website up. How do you want people to connect with you? Because you've got some great tips. You've got a very, very passionate focus on storytelling and collaboration that I love so much. How do you want people to reach out to you?
Well, first of all, subscribe to the magazine, which you can do at the website. And I am social media wise, I'm mostly on LinkedIn and Instagram. LinkedIn, just search for my name. It's Thomson No P, and and Instagram is at House of Hives.
Easy enough, and I'll make sure that those are in the show notes. And I actually subscribed as well, and I love the magazine, which is why I'm so excited to have you on the show. Well, thank you, Max, so much for joining us. It was wonderful to have you on.
Thank you so much.
All right, everybody, that wraps up this episode of Saturday Soundbites. That was Mag Thomson. Make sure, no P in that, make sure that you connect with her on Instagram and LinkedIn, and please subscribe to the magazine. It is a wonderful way to get some inspiration and to read some beautiful stories of entrepreneurs who are out there making it happen. So make sure you make that connection. All right, if you are listening on the podcast, make sure you hit subscribe. We don't want you to miss any episodes of Saturday Soundbites. And if you're watching on Facebook or YouTube, drop us some comments and Mags and I will go back and connect. And with that, I am sending you lots of positive energy and light.